Most performance reviews don't measure performance. That's not a hot take. It's not office gossip. It's what decades of research have been saying and what almost nobody with the power to change it has done anything about. You've probably sat through one. You probably had a moment, somewhere between the 5-point rating scale and the section marked areas for development, where you thought, this doesn't feel like an accurate picture of my year. You were right. And the strange part isn't that the review was inaccurate. The strange part is that everyone involved already knows this, and the review still goes out every December. This is going to take a few minutes to unpack. It's worth it. You'll never read a self-assessment the same way again. Performance reviews were not invented for offices. They were invented for factories. In the early 20th century, an engineer named Frederick Winslow Taylor developed something called scientific management. The idea was simple. Measure every part of what a worker does, find the fastest method, make everyone do it that way. It worked. In a factory, output is physical. You can count it. You can time it. The numbers actually mean something. Then, large organizations adopted the logic and applied it to everything else. By the middle of the 20th century, the U.S. Army was using formal rating systems for officers. General Electric introduced annual reviews in the 1970s. The rest of corporate America followed, because if GE was doing it, it probably made sense. Nobody paused to ask whether a system designed for counting widgets on an assembly line would also work for measuring whether a lawyer gave good advice, or a manager built a good team, or an analyst noticed the thing everyone else missed. It mostly didn't. But by then, the forms were already printed. Here is what a typical performance review actually measures. It measures how your manager remembers your last 12 months, filtered through what they happened to notice, weighted toward whatever happened most recently, and shaped by how good you were at making sure they knew what you were doing. That is not the same as measuring your performance. There's a term for this in research, the idiosyncratic rater effect. It means that a large chunk of your review score reflects your manager, their standards, their memory, their opinion of you, more than your actual work. One major study found that over 60% of the variation in performance ratings came from the person doing the rating, not the person being rated. 60%, which means your review is, statistically speaking, more of a personality profile of your manager than an assessment of your output. This has been documented since the 1990s. It is not new information. And yet, here we are. The people who would need to fix this are the people who benefited from it. Think about it. If you're a senior leader at a large organization, you got there through a system that included annual reviews. The review didn't just evaluate you. It shaped you. You learned which managers reward visibility, which ones care more about loyalty than results, and what needs improvement actually means when someone writes it about someone they're planning to let go. You got good at the game. The game rewarded you. Admitting the game is broken would mean admitting that some of who rose and who didn't had less to do with merit than everyone assumed. So organizations redesign the review instead. They change the form. They add competency frameworks. They go from annual to quarterly. They introduce 360-degree feedback. They call the whole thing a growth conversation and send a memo explaining the new approach. The manager still controls the rating. The rating still controls the raise. The raise still determines who stays. What changed was the name of the document. At some point, a new phrase entered the workplace vocabulary: managing up. It means making sure the people above you know what you're doing. Not just doing it, but actively ensuring it's visible, attributed to you, and timed correctly relative to when decisions get made. In a factory, this wasn't necessary. You either met your quota or you didn't. The output spoke for itself. In knowledge work, the output is often invisible. The question you asked that changed the direction of a project. The problem you caught before it became expensive. The colleague you talked off a ledge at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. None of that goes in the metrics. All of that goes in the perception of the people watching. And perception, it turns out, can be managed. So a rational person, working inside a system that rewards visibility over value, starts investing time in visibility. They send the update email nobody asked for. They make sure to be in the room when the result lands. They learn how the review form is worded and make sure their self-assessment uses the same language. None of this is dishonest. It's logical. It's also time that isn't spent doing the actual work. The system doesn't just fail to measure performance, it quietly redirects behavior away from it. There is a principle that explains everything we've seen so far. It's called Goodhart's law. An economist named Charles Goodhart put it like this: when a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. That's the whole thing, one sentence. But look at what it explains. Airlines measure on-time departures. On-time departures becomes the target. The plane leaves the gate on time, then sits on the tarmac for 45 minutes. The metric looks great. The passenger does not. A call center measures calls per hour. Calls per hour becomes the target. Calls get shorter. The customer's problem doesn't get solved. The metric looks great. A school measures test scores. Test scores become the target. Teachers teach to the test. Students learn how to pass exams, not how to think. The education metric looks great. Social media measures engagement. Engagement becomes the target. Outrage drives engagement better than anything else. Outrage gets amplified. The platform metric looks great. A company measures performance through a review. The review rating becomes the target. Employees manage perception. Managers reward what they can see. The HR metric looks great. In every case, the thing being measured and the thing that was supposed to be measured quietly drift apart. The system keeps producing numbers. The numbers stop meaning what they once meant. Nobody sends an email to announce this. It just happens. And once you see it, you start seeing it in places you never looked before. The research on this is consistent enough to be embarrassing. Adobe got rid of annual performance reviews in 2012. Voluntary attrition, the number of people who chose to leave, dropped by 30%. That's not a rounding error. Microsoft scrapped its stack ranking system, where employees were rated on a curve against each other. It was creating a problem no one had planned for. People were actively avoiding working with high performers because being near someone excellent made your own relative score look worse. A system designed to reward excellence was making people hide from it. Deloitte ran the numbers on their own review process and found their managers were spending 2 million hours a year on it. 2 million. They redesigned it, not to make it more accurate, but to make it short enough that people would actually do it. What the research consistently says works better: regular, specific conversations about the actual work, goals that the person and manager set together, feedback attached to real observable behavior, not a number on a scale. What most organizations do? Keep the annual review. Add a mid-year check-in. Call it a transformed process. The gap between what works and what happens is not a gap in knowledge. It's a gap in incentives. The people who would absorb the cost of changing it are not the same people currently absorbing the cost of keeping it the way it is. If you work inside one of these systems, and most people do, a few things follow. The skill that gets rewarded is not always the skill you think is being rewarded. The people who get promoted aren't always the best performers. They're often the people who figured out earliest what the system was actually measuring and optimized for that instead. That's not a conspiracy. It's just Goodhart's law applied to careers. If you're in a position to change how your team works, even just your immediate team, nothing grand, the research is not complicated. Talk to people about their work more often. Be specific. Make the goals clear before the year starts, not after it ends. Skip the form if you can. Most managers already know this. Most organizations don't protect the time to do it, which is, if you think about it, its own version of the same problem. I don't think this review measured what I actually did. Almost everyone has had that thought. Almost nobody had a name for why. Now you do. The measure became the target. The target replaced the thing it was measuring. The system kept running as if nothing had changed, because from the outside, nothing had. That's Goodhart's law. It's not a flaw specific to HR. It's what happens whenever an organization uses a number to stand in for something that's harder to count. The performance review doesn't persist because it works. It persists because the people who would need to change it rose through it, and the people who suffer from it don't have the standing to fix it. And the research that makes all of this clear gets cited in conferences, while the forms go out every December. It doesn't look broken from the inside. It looks like standard practice. The system wasn't measuring your performance. It was measuring how well you performed being in the system. Those are two different things, and the gap between them is where a lot of working life quietly disappears. Performance reviews are one example of a much larger pattern. Systems built for one purpose that quietly start serving another. The next episode looks at where else this shows up, and why it's almost impossible to see until someone points at it directly. Subscribe if you want that one when it's ready. The episodes take a while. They're supposed to.